Hello and welcome to the storytelling webinar. Greetings from Lille from Interreg Europe Joint Secretariat. My name is Mia and this is my colleague Petra. We're from our communication unit and we're here to talk about storytelling with you today.
But before we get to the storytelling, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. I'm not sure how many of you are new to us and new to this online tool. So let's have a look what is there for you and how you can use it. On your right-hand side, you have a little menu where you can find your audit settings. So just have a look whether your audio is working well. If not, you can check it there. Then you will have a chance to send us questions. So please find a little tab called questions and you can just type a hello now for us just to see whether you see where it is. And later on, if you have any questions, if you have any technical difficulties, just type it for us. And we can see that people did find it. So thanks a lot. So this will be the place for you to send us your questions. We'll have 2 blocks for your questions and then we will try to answer these questions. So enjoy the show with us and let's get to it right away.
Let's get to it. And by the way, I see all the hellos coming in. Hello to all of you. And there's more than just me and Petra here in the studio. There's a whole team of our colleagues helping us behind the scenes. We have Julie, Josephine, Paolo, and Ailesh, our colleagues who are helping you, answering all your questions, helping you with technical issues as well as content-related questions. So don't hesitate. Just send your questions through whenever you have one. Now, what are we going to talk about today? Storytelling. We have a couple of different points for you to discuss. We want to talk about how to turn your project results into a story. It means that we are going to talk about the components of a story, what goes into it, how you promote your results in a way that is interesting and captivating for the audience. We're also going to talk about how to turn those stories into videos. So we're going to have some practical tips and also some examples on how we've done it from our side. If we have a look at the agenda, there's a couple of points that we'll go through on our journey together today. First of them is going to be 5 W's. What exactly those are, you're going to find out really soon. Then we're going to talk about how to build your story. Once you have the key components, how you put them together so that it builds into a story. And then we're going to wrap up with ideas for a video about your project. And I keep mentioning project because we're going to talk about Interreg Europe project results and turning those into videos or captivating stories. We had quite a few people registered and I saw that there's already 150 of you joining us today. What do you think, Petra? Should we see who's here with us?
Yes. We have a question for you, a little poll. We mentioned it at the very beginning that we will have a few polls for you.
Yeah.
So let's just do the first one and tell us whether you are working or somehow linked to an Interreg Europe project.
Exactly. So very simple yes or no question.
Exactly.
Are you working in a project or with a project or not? We see that the responses are coming in and I see that we probably have quite a few friends following us because 82% of you so far are from a project.
From an Interreg Europe.
From an Interreg Europe project.
Yes.
That's very nice. 83% of you voted. I think, Petra, we can close the poll because we're getting very close to 90%.
Yeah.
And let's have a look at the results. Let's show them to you as well. So who is here? A lot of project partners from Interreg Europe project, which is great. But we also have some other people who are probably interested in either promoting other types of projects or just interested in storytelling. I hope that we'll have some interesting tips for you as well. Many of the examples that we're going to share today come from Interreg Europe projects and more specifically from our web documentary, which is a new project that we've been working on to kind of put together or give a place to show all these stories that we keep talking about. So the idea today is twofold. We want to help you to tell good stories about your project. And these can be Interreg Europe project or other types of projects as well. And we want to help you to present your results to the broad public. So we're really going to focus on the results and achievements of the project and how to really share those success stories that you have. On this, as I said, we've been working tirelessly this year on a new web documentary called When People Work Together, Solutions Come Easily, because that's how we see it. Following all 258 of our projects and the results that are coming in, we have been quite impressed, and we've been thinking
yeah.
about how to share these with the public,
broader
with you.
audience.
Yeah,
broader audience, not only with those who are following us as in Brussels,
yeah.
but really people all around, anyone who's interested what fruits of cooperation can be. So we were very happy to manage to put these stories in our web documentary.
Exactly.
And
it was launched recently. We just launched it in October, and it's been online for a couple of weeks. I don't know if you've already had a chance to see it. We have another poll, and I would just like to check if you've maybe had a chance to look at the stories, maybe seen one or more of the videos. There's altogether 6 stories featured at the moment. All of them from very different types of projects, showcasing different types of achievements. Have you seen them already?
At least some of them.
Yes, we're going to share some examples from these stories. So if you've seen them, you maybe know where we're coming from. But even if not, that's definitely a resource worth checking out. And there's a way for you to contribute to it as well. We'll get to it towards the end of the webinar.
Exactly. So I think some of you already voted. We can see that many of you didn't have a chance yet to check this story. So we hope that the examples that we will be using, the visuals that we'll be using in this webinar will not be too confusing for you, but we'll try to give it or put it in a good context so that you follow what we are talking about actually. I think we can close this poll as 83% of you already voted. So
yes, and I see that most of you haven't had a look at the web documentary yet. And there's a few of you who have seen 1 or 2 videos, so I'm pretty sure there's going to be some new examples today. We recommend you to check out the web documentary. It's available online at stories.interregeurope.eu. The videos are also available on our YouTube channel, and we've been promoting them quite a bit on social media, so you might come across them if you follow our channels. But Petra, what do you think? We should probably move to the real topic of the day,
so.
Storytelling. As I mentioned in the beginning, we're going to talk about 5 W's, and now is the time to tell you what they are.
Yes, you just see them on your screen at the moment. So these are really the components of a story. It doesn't say that it's a good story, but any story that you tell should have this what. What is this story actually about? It needs to have who. Who are the protagonists? Who are the people? Who are the heroes or the enemies in the story? You need to have a time dimension of your story. When does this happen? Was there some beginning? Was there some middle of the story? How did it end? You need to have a place where it happened. You need to locate it. Sometimes you also need to put in your story why this is happening or explaining how this is happening. And in this webinar, we'll be trying kind of to show you or lead you through these 5 W's in a storytelling. Of course, there is no guarantee it's going to be a good story, but we try to at least share with you what we did in the web documentary and how we were trying to turn these stories about our project results into something attractive and telling about good cooperation among our project partners.
Exactly.
So let's move to it. Mia.
Let's get to it. First of the W's, what? You need to know what your story is about. First of all, you need to know what you're talking about. And in this regard, be a little selective. Don't try to cover the whole history of your project. Really, what is the result? What is the achievement you're proud about? What is the thing you want to promote? What is the core idea of your story? Start with that. How we did it for the stories in our web documentary, we have a story about social enterprises. We wanted to show what the social enterprises are and how regional authorities help them. So we showed how these enterprises help people who might otherwise have difficulties in finding a job. They're somehow in a disadvantaged position, or they've had other difficulties in life and they might need some additional support to find their place in the society. We've looked at the textile industry and what is going on there, how innovation can help the textile industry to become more sustainable, how they can use less water, how they can develop their processes, and how they can, well, make fashion more sustainable. That's one of the stories. We're also looking at how historical cities can fight with waste and how they can develop new types of approaches to waste management to make sure that we can all enjoy the beautiful heritage of these cities without being swamped in waste.
Exactly.
And we're also looking at biodiversity and the importance of nature and green areas in cities, how that fits together with cities and public infrastructure, and again, how we can all work together to make sure that we preserve that for the future generations.
Exactly.
If we move further, what is the next step?
So when you establish what is really the key element of your story, you need to decide who will be your heroes, who will be the protagonist, who will be the people kind of telling the story, which will kind of show how these things in your projects happen. So, for example, in the social enterprises story, we picked Helen and Tony, two people in Sweden where this story happened, who were in very dire situation, and it was the social enterprises who helped them find a new life, find it through employment. And then this was kind of the hero of our story who started in a very bad situation and thanks to the help of social enterprises ended up having a very good life. Exactly. And they are now happy. Yeah. Or if you don't really have this very strong personal story, you can find the enemy even in the subject of whatever you want to describe in your story. So in Spain, where we were talking about waste in historical cities, it is really the waste that's the enemy. You're fighting this ugly bins that are all over the place and you just want to hide them somewhere. So this was your enemy, and the story was talking about how to actually hide them, how to make the waste management, put it out of the sight of people so that they can really appreciate beauty of a city. So those might be your heroes, those might be your enemies in your story. So that's the who. But what about audience, Mia?
Yes, I mean, you're not telling the story just for the sake of telling a story. Once you know what your story is about and who the main characters or the main, let's say, protagonists are, or what you're fighting for or against, you need to figure out who you're talking to. What kind of audience is it? Where do you want to promote this story? What kind of people do you want to talk to? Is it the general public? Is it a very specific audience? What kind of terms do they understand or use? What kind of language, what kind of tone, what kind of format works for them? All this kind of features in once you've figured out how you want to build your story. So keep that in mind. I mean, start with your idea, but then start thinking about who the story is for.
Exactly. Exactly. Think about it. Do people that you want to address like to read? Do they like to listen? Do they like to watch pictures? Do they like to watch videos? Who are they? Do they like numbers? So think about your audience, and here is a big no. Remember, you are not doing the story either for your partners or for your colleagues in the institution, or even not for us as a program. You're really doing it for a specific audience. There is a reason why you want to tell your story, when you want to present the best result of the project that you have. And keep this in mind, and for that adjust then the language and the format that you want to pick. So please do not do the story just for us.
And not just for your partners or just your
Yes.
colleagues. I mean, it's important, of course, to share your results with them as well. And with us, we appreciate it a lot, but really think about your audience.
I think we can maybe share a little anecdote from here, because when we were doing the web documentary, we built the stories in a certain way, and then we received some feedback from some of our colleagues who were commenting, not always in a very positive way, why the policy change wasn't described in a lot of detail. So yeah, we did get this feedback when we thought, well, we didn't do the stories for you. We didn't do it for our authorities who are overseeing what we are doing, but really for broader public who can understand what our projects are doing and how through the policy change things are getting better for all the citizens.
And this is by no means easy. I mean, we're all used to communicating or talking about our project or our activities in a certain way. Yeah. And I think we even have an example of this, right? And you really, once you start promoting it, you have to start thinking about how the message is going to get across so that others are also going to be interested in hearing what you have to say.
Exactly. So just to get to where it was not easy, this is where we started when we were building our stories. This is a show from a table when you are telling us how a policy change is happening. And what you write is good. It's correct. This is what you should do, because this table and your progress report is the means for your policy officers and finance officers to find out what you are doing and how you can actually give us evidence that a policy change, that your results have been achieved. And this is all fine. But then you need to think about it, how to boil it down to something like this. So out of a relatively long text, which is very technical, you can boil it down to several very relatively simple paragraphs showing what was actually the specific result. So it's not easy.
And what is really the essence of your story? Because
Exactly.
details, people will always find them. You can always
Yeah.
provide more information, but what is really the hook that brings them in and wants them,
Exactly.
makes them want to learn more?
So just a little example, a little inspiration for you, what you could at least aim to do, very ambition could be. Now, about the audience, I think we still stay with it a little bit. So Mia, how to think about it apart from the language?
Well, I mean, really, what is important for your audience? How do you make your story kind of their story? How do you build some sort of link to it so that they can relate to the story, so that they can understand the story, and so that the story raises their interest? Think about the results you have. I mean, of course, you started your project with big visions on what you want to do and where you want to go. What came out of it and why is it relevant for people? For example, our story from a project called Perfect, they managed to implement a green tramway in Bratislava in Slovakia. And that is definitely something, first of all, worth bragging about. It's a great achievement, but it's also something that is very relevant for the people in the city and in the region, and something that others can learn from. And it's also a very concrete outcome of working together with other regions. Where did the inspiration come from? What happened? And how it's visible now in the region. We have some other regions who also found inspiration through cooperation and working with others across Europe. Did they maybe implement a new bus line? Did they make mobility more sustainable? Did they help tourists to reach places that might have been difficult to reach before? If so, let people know. In a story about the heritage cities and waste management, they implemented new waste containers, meaning that it takes much less space to sort of collect waste and to take it back. And this is, again, a very concrete result, which might not sound like a very interesting or a big thing in itself, but put it in context. Show what it means for that city, for that area, for the people in that area, and how it's relevant for all of us in the end. Same thing. How are people working for sustainability? Did they implement something concrete, something that people can understand? Maybe there was an insect hotel that is used. Maybe they found good hiding places for other types of animals. Yeah. How does all that play into what we call a policy change? What does it mean in real life? Show that. Either, well, it might be just a document, but the document and the words on paper and the politicians' actions finally add up to something that is relevant for the people in the region, for all of us. Show that.
So yes, if you do manage to get your policy changes already printed, already approved, don't be shy to show them, but then link it to the actual impact and actual effect on people's lives. It might be just in the process of being built, just like the tramway or just like the biodiversity measures with little insect hotels. Mm-hmm. Now, we said already what is the kind of in the story, who plays in the story, for whom this story is, and now how can we put it in time? So give your story a time dimension. So what we did in our stories for the web documentary, we asked the projects to collect pictures from the study visits where they actually found inspiration for these changes. So when you are building your story, think about, okay, how can I put it in context? How can I show that there was a beginning of the story, beginning of a cooperation where we actually met with partners when they showed us their good practices, which were inspiring for the policy change that we did later on, and that now being approved will have beneficial effects on people. So, and then put them either in your story as pictures or as we did in our videos as kind of like an archival footage in the videos. So just as a background of the time dimension of the story.
Yeah, and all this basically serves to add a little bit of depth to your story, makes it more credible. You know, these results don't come out of nowhere. There really is a process, or we could say a journey behind, and give hints of that, show where it comes from, and make it visible in your story as well. And related to that, don't just put in a timeline and show that there was cooperation before the results were implemented. Put it in place. Try to be concrete. I mean, just as you saw with the examples, all of these happen in a specific place at a specific time as well, but make it concrete. Show them where it happens. Show them what the place looks like. Show them where the people work. Take them to that place. I mean, either in words or through sounds or in pictures.
Exactly.
Make it visible. Were there several countries? Put them on a map. Which regions were involved? Where does this happen? Pin it down. I mean, not everyone might know. You know, there are regions that are not that well known, or cities that are kind of small. Show people where it is. Help them to really visualize where your story is happening. And if it's happening in a place that has some sort of recognizable features or something that people can, you know, recognize once they see it, show it. Really make the story about a place and the people in that specific location. Try to be as concrete as possible.
Exactly. Take people on that journey. Help them get immersed in that place by providing them all these context pictures, the context visuals. It will help them feel that they are part of your story. And that is something that makes a story attractive, because you want to touch that fabric. You want to smell that flower that is somewhere shown in that video. So think about putting it in place, putting it in context so that it's nice and attractive for people that you're trying to reach. So this is really about putting it in place. And now, why are you actually doing this story? What do you want to achieve with that story? And we have several reasons for you that you might consider. We would not say that we considered all of them when we were doing our stories, but we are trying to put an example from our story that might represent the reasons why you're doing a story.
Yeah, because again, I mean, you're not telling a story just for the sake of telling a story.
Yeah.
What do you want to achieve with it? You want people to be interested. You've thought about your audience. You have a clear message. Why? Maybe you want to raise awareness about your work. Maybe you want to make people know that you've done something great, like starting up a new bus line that helps tourists go to distant locations.
Exactly. Or maybe you just want to show that something that you are doing in your city is relevant in a bigger context. So when in Slovakia they're building these little community gardens and little beetle hotels, it is actually a big part of biodiversity protection, which then is in a bigger context contributing to kind of mitigating climate change. So put it in a bigger context. Maybe that's what you want to do with your story.
Yeah. Build the links. I mean, of course you have great results, but it's always linked to something bigger, and just make that visible. Or maybe you really thought of something new, something that has not been discussed so much before. For example, our project about sustainable fashion and reset, they really thought about how to make textile industry more sustainable with innovation. If there is a new vision of, you know, a new industry that is working in a different way from the past so that it's sustainable and can, you know, sustain itself in the long run, share that. Yeah. Maybe you want to inspire people to, you know, follow your path and do something similar.
Exactly. The vision of making technology work for you for the sake of saving resources. Yeah. I think this is the vision that they were trying to pass in their story. Another reason why you might consider presenting one of the best results that you did or you will do in your project is to educate people. Yeah. Is to really explain a little bit what you do and kind of give them more information, not only in terms of that you're raising their awareness, but really explaining how you are doing things. This is something I would say that we were trying to do with social enterprises. We think that it's relatively a known concept already, but still explaining how enterprises can help people, and this could be their main goal in really making people's lives better while making profit, and then reusing this profit for further doing good for people. So this was part kind of educating what a social enterprise is, and our story showed how policy change actually supports social enterprises. So educate could be another reason why you want to present your story.
Yeah, or maybe you want to call on others to do something. Maybe you really have a strong message that you want to pass, and maybe you really want to convince them that they should also take action.
Exactly. And in this respect, why not to collect waste? Why not to reuse organic waste? This was one of the messages of the story from Spain about waste management in historical cities.
And really showing that it's something that everyone can, play their role in, and really encouraging them to do their part.
Yeah, all citizens need to take part. I think that's how that little story finishes. Yeah. Everybody needs to care for their city to keep it beautiful.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to even be a little bit provocative. I mean, if there is a message that is not often voiced, it might be worth sharing. It might make your story stronger. Going back again to the story of sustainable fashion and the Reset project, there was a big part of the story that covers how competitors who never discussed with one another sort of managed to come together and realize that by sharing experiences and sharing kind of solutions and ideas for the future, they can all learn from each other and benefit from that cooperation. So showing that something that was really unthinkable in the past is becoming a reality thanks to cooperation or other reasons, can really strengthen your story.
Exactly. And actually brings benefits to them all. So it's really a win-win situation for everybody. Exactly. So these were just some of the reasons why you might consider doing a story and presenting it to your audience. And now, as you see, this is the first section when we have time for questions.
Well, I would maybe... if you think about a story, like what is the starting point? Where do you really start? How do you start building it? Do you go through all the 5 W's in order, let's say, or can you kind of pick and mix?
Pick what I think what is the most important. Pick what are you proud of? What is really the result? What is something that you want other people to know? And then from there start building. Can you find in it the human element? Because after all, we are all people and you need to relate. You need to make your audience relate to your story. They need to find themselves in it a little bit. So I would start with the result and then think about where can I put the relatable elements in it so that people can find themselves. People can say, oh yes, if I do start recycling, my street, my part of city will be cleaner and I'll be happier about what I see. Or if I start working in a little community garden, I will be very happy to see all these flowering meadows in front of my apartment. So I would start really with the result and then with the human side of that story. What about you, Mia? What do you think? How would you go about it?
I think for me it's the same, and I would kind of take maybe the first one, what, still starting with the content. I think that's very important, and also the why. I mean, you really have to, well, first of all, pick the result that you want to talk about, and I think you need to make it clear to yourself why you want to share that story, because once you have those two figured out, it'll be much easier to pick the ones in the middle. I mean, you pick a relevant hero or an enemy for the story. You think about, you find your audience based on that. I mean, who do you want to influence? What kind of action do you want them to take, and so on. So I would really use all of them as kind of tools to kind of guide you in the path of sort of shaping that story.
So Carrie's asking, what about backing track? What about copyright? To be honest, I'm not 100% sure what you mean by backing.
I think backing track in this context is probably about the music. If you're thinking about videos and what is played on the background, and this applies not only actually to the music that you use, but for any other visuals, or I don't know if you want to add any additional archive footage or other type of material in your video, or use pictures as well. I mean, copyright is definitely a very important issue, and you most certainly want to make sure that you have rights to use any content that you plan to make part of your story.
For this, what we try to do is really to do most of the footage ourselves, so it belongs to us. There are places where you can find copyright kind of stock footage. You do have copyright-free music. You need to very often either pay or mention who is the author, which is possible. You do have credits at the end of the video, but always be very careful what kind of material you buy or acquire, but we would encourage you the best, just do your own. Of course, we are not encouraging that all of you should become musicians and start composing
with music. I think music is probably the trickiest
Yes.
out of different types of content. But yes, use as much kind of open source or publicly accessible material as possible. And if you end up going for something that needs to be licensed, well, yes, then you do need to purchase a license for it.
Yeah. Now we have another question. What about describing the project when it is starting? I find useful to engage the audience from the beginning of the process.
I would say it depends on the type of story that you're trying to convey. I think in the beginning of the project, it probably makes sense to really build up the expectations and highlight the vision that you plan to have for your project. But I would say that once you start achieving results, once those visions turn into something more concrete, that is really usually something that is more impressive to a lot of people because it turns those visions into something concrete. So in the beginning, yes, you can highlight where the project is coming from and where it plans to go, but the further you get, the more I would really focus on the results. And also for a story, we were talking about, putting a timeline on it and making, the journey visible. And you can do it with very small hints. It can be just sort of side notes or additional features that are part of your story. You don't need to go into a very lengthy description of, how you found your partners and how the meetings went and how it all worked. I mean, it's all important as background information, but once you get to the story, you really want to focus on one key message. Make sure that that message is clear. If you want to talk about the journey, talk about the journey, but that's then a different story. If you want to talk about results, then the focus should really be on the results.
But, don't take it that you should write stories only about your results. Of course, you need to write, put in pictures, all these different stories that are happening in your project from the very beginning. Just, I think what Mia said, try to keep it focused, try to keep it simple, and try to keep it clear for outsiders of your project. Think about some of the stakeholders that you are meeting at the meetings. Would they all understand what your project is about, what you are really trying to achieve? I know that sometimes the policy element gets in the way and becomes a little tricky, but try to think of a creative way how to say, through the policy change, we will change lives of people, and then that's where you should get concrete, when you should get specific. If we manage to get this done, the policymakers agree to this, people would have better cycling paths, people will have, I don't know, waste out of their way, people will have more community gardens. Like all these small things, or entrepreneurs, we didn't really talk about entrepreneurs, just the social enterprises. Entrepreneurs will have it easier to maybe finance their good ideas.
Exactly.
So get to that one thing that is very concrete, very specific, that you think you can achieve. And then much powerful, whenever you get to the results, whenever you have the policy instrument change, whenever you have new financing call approved, this is when you can start talking. Now the enterprises can actually apply for calls and improve how they're functioning and become more capable of improving or doing their business.
And I would also say that building a story is kind of a continuous process. I mean, you might have your storyline in mind, but for example, what happened to us when we were filming the videos for the web documentary, we had a lot of content and a lot of the final story was actually crafted at the editing phase when we picked the focus depending on what really made the most sense and what was the most visible and what was the most, let's say, captivating story that was there. Because a lot of it, I mean, you have an idea of how you want to share your story, but especially since we are working with people, once you start asking them how they've experienced the cooperation, what they've got out of it, what was the benefit in their life that they see out of it, you might get some very surprising results as well and some answers that you might not have expected. And making use of that, keeping it genuine, is something that is very important.
Exactly.
I think that we're kind of moving a little bit past our 5 W's into the next item on our list, which is the how. how do you actually get to the story and how do you build it? So Petra, what do you say? We move on and
Exactly.
jump to our next item.
Thanks a lot there's a few other questions which we will address. Yeah. There will be another section for Q&A. So we'll certainly get back to them, but let's move on and then spend the rest of this online seminar on really talking about your questions. Yeah. So let's move on.
Yeah, so keep sending in your questions. I mean, we will still be answering them either behind the scenes or taking them at the end of the session. And now let's move on to how to build your story.
Exactly.
So
now
we have, on this regard, we want to turn back to you a little bit before we go further. We have a call for you to appeal to all of the senses, all the possible ones. If you think about stories you've heard or maybe a story that you have in mind, what for you makes for a captivating story? What kind of element should it include? What is important? What kind of senses can you appeal to? What kind of methods or tools can you use to make your story more convincing or captivating? If you have some ideas, please pass them through in the comments box and we'll have a look at them. We have a few tips for you as well, and I think we'll start going through them very shortly. But if you have any ideas on what makes a good story, please do share them.
Yes, when you think about the best story you heard in the past week or month, why did it stuck in your mind? What was it about this story that really you think, oh, this was so great, this was so interesting? So please go to the question tab and tell us what makes a story captivating for you. And we'll comment on it as we go along. Yeah. So we already have actually someone saying emotions.
Emotions, very good. Sounds like
exactly
something that we might be talking about in a while.
Yes.
So emotions is definitely one. Do you have some others? Let us know.
Yes. So, but in the meantime,
inspiration, replicability, more emotions mentioned twice.
Values,
very good.
Yeah.
Something that is relatable, most certainly. A sense of surprise. Yes. Telling something unexpected.
Yes.
Yes. Couldn't agree more. Yes, definitely.
That's very humor. Much it. If you manage to put humor in your story, you're the winner.
Yeah.
So yes, so much. Yeah.
Colors, people. Yes. I think there's a lot of good ideas. Keep sending in more conflict, uncertainty, authenticity. Let's see what we have on our list and see if that gives you any additional ideas.
This is so much in line. So you see that you yourself already know what kind of is some of the key elements of your story. Think about this way, like what can I put in the story so that it gets people hooked? It gets people attracted. We are not saying it's easy.
No.
We're not even saying we managed in those 5 stories that we have in our web documentary. We tried, we did our best, but just thinking about it, I think puts you in the right mindset.
And in the end, I mean, this is something that comes pretty intuitively to all of us. When you start thinking about a good story, when you start thinking about what you might have seen or what kind of feelings it raised in you, I mean, it sort of comes from the inside. I think sort of the problem here is linking that to what we're doing, the projects or policy issues or something that seems very technical, but it is there. The link is there.
Yeah.
Let's see what we have on our list, shall we?
Exactly. Yeah, let's move on.
So wake up all senses in people. Use really all the different senses that you can think of. Make your story kind of complete. And don't make it too obvious. We keep saying that, focus on a clear message, keep it simple enough, think about the language and all that, but leave some room for people to draw their own conclusions, to really get into the story and to help them to connect the dots.
Exactly.
I mean,
people
make them part of the story.
Exactly. Make them part of the story and let them actually kind of fill in the gaps. Yeah. Yes, as Mia said, connect the dots. And what we tried to do in our Mia, shall I? Okay, I'll just look at it.
Well,
so, for example, in our story about social enterprises, we showed people in their context and smiling and passing their enthusiasm. So this positive emotion about helping people certainly was very seductive for us when we were editing some of the interviews that we had. Exactly. We just thought we have to pass this because this was for us so attractive, so nice.
And I mean, it's one thing to hear, for example, a politician say that, oh, we have a new strategy and we plan to support our social enterprises, but hearing it from a person who's really working in an enterprise and who's already seen that, their business is benefiting from these changes or the support that they're getting from their local authorities, and just seeing the smile on their face, it makes the message so much more compelling.
That's the emotion of kind of positiveness, of helping people and smiling and being super happy and enthusiastic about it.
If we move further, what else can we do?
When you think about kind of bringing people in the environment, so when you talk about biodiversity, when you talk about nature, bring people with you to the nature so that they can imagine, they hear the leaves, that they can hear the insects kind of flying around them, and they feel that they are part of that nature.
And again, I mean, even though we talk about policies, even though we talk about strategies, even though we talk about a lot of it is texts or funding or very technical issues, think about the practical link. Show where the final impact will be.
Exactly, or already is.
Yeah.
You might go more on the negative side when we were talking about waste. Maybe make people, show them images when they can imagine, oh, this smells, you know, this is ugly. We really don't want this. If you are more on that side that this is the enemy I want to get rid of. So let people smell things, not necessarily always badly. It might be flowers that smell really beautifully. It might be cooking. Many of you are working on projects about food. So just showing some food cooking, you know, people get, oh, food, you know, this really smells great and will taste great. So try to encourage all these senses in people that they would like to touch, that they would like to smell. They can imagine actually that smell or the environment that you are in with your story, and they would like to be part of this.
Exactly. And talking about touching, I mean, if there is a concrete element in your story, an item that can really be grabbed or touched or something, make that also visible. Make people feel how it would be to touch that. Maybe you're talking about textiles or fabric, like in our example, and people really could feel how it is to touch this. Or again, I mean, the same applies to a lot of other things as well. So really appeal to all senses, because that makes your story more complete.
You mentioned, some of you, that it needs to be relatable. And I think through these, you do make it relatable, because people feel like, oh yeah, I also want to touch this. Oh yeah, I can hear the water dripping if you show a little image of rain when you're, for example, talking about trying to retain as much rain as possible now with the problem of droughts in many places. So just make it relatable through these senses.
Yeah, and we're not saying that you have to apply all of them in one story. It might not be fitting, but think about how you can really make people feel part of your story, whether it is through spelling, hearing, touching, other types of senses.
Exactly.
Going beyond senses, I mean, the stories, what are they built of? How do we communicate? A lot of it is through words. We can do a lot with images, we can do a lot with senses, but still, the big bulk of the story is going to be in words. This can be either written text or spoken. And words can be incredibly powerful. You can actually tell a story in just a few words. We've got a couple of examples for you. Born a twin, graduated an only child.
Isn't that sad? That's just heartbreaking. Exactly.
Torched the haystack, found the needle. An original solution.
Yes.
But effective.
Some of you said that conflict could be part of it. This might be one of them. Exactly. Do you have another example for us?
I do. Looked out, pulled the plug, and found life.
What a journey.
What a journey.
What a journey. So
in just 6 words, you can go very far.
Of course, we are not encouraging you that you have to write all your complex stories in 6 words. It was just to show you that words are very powerful if they are put together in the right order and with the right story in mind. In a way.
And also in the times of social media and short attention spans, you really do have to think about how to distill that message of yours into just a couple of words.
Yes. I just wanted to say that we tried a little bit to go in this line when we were thinking about the titles of our videos, of our stories. We tried to really find the right words, few words that will somehow show what is the essence of the story in it. So also when you're thinking maybe about a title, if you decide to do a video, this might be a little hint how to go about it. Really think about few words that already tell at least part of the story. But it's not only about written words.
No.
Mia, what else can we do with words?
Well, of course, you have the spoken word as well, and you can use words in different media. I mean, words can also be even a visual element, but a lot of it, I mean, especially if it's spoken, you can hear it.
Yeah.
And there's different types of medium you can use. I mean, we've talked a lot about videos. We've talked a little bit about images. We've talked about social media. There's also another type of format that can be very, very useful and very effective for passing this type of messages. And that would be podcasts. It's basically built on words.
Yes. It's a little bit like a radio. We are not sure whether you actually know what podcast is, and we are a little interested, I suppose. So why don't we have a very, very quick poll just to double check?
Another little question for you.
Very
is
little.
Podcasts something that you're familiar with? Have you perhaps listened to them? Or do you do so regularly? And then for you to think, would that be something that could work for you to share your stories? But first, let us know if that is a format that you're familiar with.
Yeah, but I think most of you do. So yeah, this just confirms a little bit that people overall know what podcasts are.
Yeah.
Maybe they are not listening to them regularly. Yeah. So yeah, this is great.
Let's share the results so that you see them as well. I mean, we're quite glad with these results because it really shows that, you know, you can test your story in different types of platforms as well. It might be something that you haven't thought about before, but it doesn't always have to be text. It doesn't always have to be a video. Think about other types of formats that you can use. Yeah. Maybe podcast could be one of them. Who knows?
And with some good music, that's how you can tell your story.
Yeah.
We are not necessarily pushing for this idea, but just presenting it as one possible form. So I'll hide the
Yeah, and then if we move further, what else can you use than just words? This is just an example. We've dealt a lot with very long texts, not just from reports, but also from our own reports, articles, and so on. A little while ago, we had a look at the results from Interreg 4C, our previous program, and we ended up with quite a pile of text outlining those results, which were quite impressive. But still, even though we had a very lengthy report and very detailed kind of case study examples, we managed to distill them into just a couple of sentences. Here's one example on the screen, but there's plenty more. So it is possible. It takes a little bit of thinking, but it is possible.
Yeah, it's not easy, but for social media, we know we are limited by visuals, short texts, and that's where you sometimes are pushed to. You need to cut really to the basics to pass the key message of your story.
But let's move beyond words and let's just summarize very quickly. So in terms of words, you can definitely use the project website. You can do news articles. You can share the information there, thinking about the right kind of format for that. I mean, you don't want to replicate your progress report content directly on the website as such, but adapt it accordingly. You should use, and we would really encourage you to use, the storytelling section of your progress report to share those stories with us, because that's for us a very valuable source of information when we collect stories and examples to share with others. You can also do press releases. Think about how to formulate your story so that it appeals, for example, to your local media, and how to pitch it to the journalists so that it will get press attention as well. Moving forward, because we do have some other ideas that we want to share with you as well.
Yes.
If you go beyond words, the next thing is obviously
images. And images, there is a known saying that they speak 100 words with one image. This is something that we just found recently, talking about Brexit. Yes, sad news, Brexit, but Banksy, how can we call him? He's doing all these graffiti, very elaborate graffiti all over the place, known artist, and he just says full stories, very often very emotional, just in an image.
Yeah, a lot of emotion in just one image. We do have some other examples as well. I mean, look at this office. There's an empty chair, but there's a whole story behind.
Yeah, what could it mean? Very often we use a similar image when we have a vacancy. When we are actually asking for people to come over and work with us.
There's a chair to be filled.
Exactly. So think in creative ways how one picture or several pictures can tell your story. And of course, remember to include visuals and include photos and images with anything you write. It just helps to illustrate what you're actually talking about.
Yeah. Even though a picture speaks 1,000 words or 100 words or even more, I mean, it might still make sense to combine it with words every now and then.
Oh, yes. Now, what are some other ways to tell stories?
Well, beyond words and images, numbers also tell a story. Very often not necessarily in themselves. They might be a little bit hard to read. They might be a little difficult for people to grasp, but be wise about your numbers and you can build a story out of them as well. Infographics in this regard is a very, very useful tool. Put your numbers in context. Make them relevant for people. What does it mean? How does it link to something else that they know? How big of an impact have you really had? Maybe you want to talk about the local funding that you've managed to secure for your next project, or maybe you've influenced the lives of so and so many people, or maybe you've helped, I don't know, hundreds of people to find a new job. What does it mean?
Put it in perspective. Compare it to something so that people can actually relate to it. If you just say 100 people, well, what does it mean 100 people? When you say it's 50% of all you do in 1 year or 2 years, that's going to tell a story that is much stronger than if you just say 100 people. So think about relations between numbers and what these numbers actually mean to people. So relate them. We have another example for you.
Yes, if we look past the obvious, I mean, you can find inspiration from different types of numbers. You don't always need to restrict yourself to project communication alone. Look at how others do it, what other types of formats there are, and maybe find some inspiration from it. As we said, you know, make your numbers mean something to people. Show what it means in context. Who knew that mosquitoes are actually the deadliest animals?
Yes, that was a surprise for us a little bit. And the second are human, which is very sad, very sad. But yes, look for inspiration. When you already have your story in your mind, look at how other people tell their stories and try to think in creative ways how you can make your story stand out, how you can make it maybe easier to understand for people. And numbers and relations sometimes help people to understand more complex ideas because they're visual.
And especially with visuals and short texts and so on, you can test your ideas. You can see if people understand it and if it flies, and then build it from there.
And then, as we are talking about more or less the whole time, as our stories in the web documentary are videos, but we just try to show not only videos, we have a few examples of videos for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's different types of videos. You can do videos with people, or you can have real filmed images, or you can do animations. We thought about showing you two examples, one of each. One of them is an animation that, especially if you're working in an Interreg Europe project or know our program, you might have seen it. It is a short 1-minute animation that basically explains what Interreg Europe is all about. Very complicated program, a big one, but somehow we still managed to put it in 1 minute. Have a look at this, and we'll be back with you afterwards.
To say that Europe is facing sustainable mobility issues is like saying that a volcano is somewhat hot. Many countries are working on innovative ideas to tackle this challenge. But if everyone is reinventing the wheel on his own, we're wasting time and money, even if it's a really nice wheel. Policymakers all over Europe are struggling with the same challenges, like sustainable mobility, innovation, economic development, and resource efficiency. Luckily, Europe has a solution that allows regional and local authorities to cooperate, a program called Interreg Europe. Instead of having to do it all on your own, you can learn from each other and bring this experience to your own region. The program can fund your project. Now we got your attention. So subscribe to our community to be inspired by what other regions have done in the past. find project partners, build a project together and get funded. Let's share solutions for better regional policies.
So now let's have a look at another example that we have, and that is an introduction from a video that we did for a web documentary. So let's have a quick look at least the beginning of it.
I honestly think around here and in the UK, we've been driven by a growing realisation that our sector, our industry, has got a massive problem. And some of the statistics about every pair of jeans taking 7,000 litres of water to make and 2 billion pairs of jeans a year, those things are starting to get in the public consciousness. And we need to make sure that we know how to minimise the impact on the environment. So it was in recognition of the problem that drew us to Reset, which was really starting to share some information about solutions.
So that was Bill. In just 43 seconds, he managed to tell you where he's coming from, what they're doing, what they're aiming to do, and what the problem was that they wanted to address, and how cooperation helped in that. The story goes on for a couple more minutes. If you want to see the whole thing, it's available in our web documentary, stories.interregeurope.eu. But now, enough of examples from us. Now we turn over to you. One of the main ideas today was to give you some ideas on how you can build your project story. And for you to do that, from the program behalf, we have some support for you. We have recently sent a sort of call for all the lead partners to think about their best result, or the result that might be coming if you've just started with your project, and to maybe turn that into a video, something similar as the stories that we've shared in the web documentary, something that really highlights the one success story that you're proud of when it comes to your project. What we provide, Petra, maybe you give an overview.
So we provided you with the guidance notebook, of course, but apart from it, we have a little instructional video. Well, I say little, but it's about 15 minutes. And some of you, as you were asking about the technicality of doing a video, this is exactly a little video that explains step by step how to do your video from point A, when you build your story, when you think about what will be the narrative, how am I going to tell my story, to going to the location, selecting the interviewees, doing the video making, and then bringing it to the editing room and editing it, adding music, adding the credits, including your logo, because after all, if the video you decide to do is financed by a project, the project identity needs to be present there. So if you are interested in anything technical about how to do a video story, this is certainly a very great resource for you.
Yeah, and the instructional video was actually produced by the filmmakers that we worked with when we were developing our story. So it's really from the filmmaker's perspective on how you build a great story and put it together as a video. So some technical tips there. We also provide some resources for inspiration. We show you how we did the start and the end of the video. So you can maybe think about doing something similar, as Petra said, including your project identity. Then if we look at what exactly is available from us, it's really the best project result, one video per project and up to 5,000 euros per project. This should be funded from your underspending, so there's no additional funding available as such. But if your project allows, this is really an opportunity that we would like you to make use of.
Exactly.
Of course, if you plan to do so, keep us posted. Let your FO know, and will then help you through the journey.
And especially if you really follow the instructional video and the storyline that the video makers who worked with us suggest, we will be very happy to have a look at your story and make it part of the web documentary that is online, that is accessible to everybody.
Yeah, as we said, the web documentary is online and it's a source of inspiration, but it's also something that you can be part of.
Yeah.
So if your video really follows the guidelines, then we would be more than happy to make it part of the web documentary. With that being said, I think we're getting very close to the end of today's session. We can still take a few more questions if you have some, but we just want to summarize the key tips that we have from our side. 4 tips for storytelling.
Be specific. Be as specific as you can, but don't overdo it with too many details.
Be authentic. I mean, be real. Don't rehearse it too much. Don't do a script. Let the people speak. Let them share their own experiences, their own feelings, and make that part of your story.
Be engaging. Some of you mentioned humor. If you manage to put humor in it, great. Make people do the sense kind of attachment to your story. Do they feel? Do they smell? Do they feel part of it? So try to put your story and tell your story in an engaging way.
And be consistent. These days, people have very limited attention spans. They won't follow your story until eternity. Have a clear core message. Think about your storyline before you go into building your story and follow through it while you do it. And the next one is related to it. Keep it simple.
Yes.
This applies to everything. Language, format, storyline, content. Just really make it easy and appealing for people.
Exactly. Yeah. Just to maybe share another little anecdote from our editing of the stories. We had so many good examples of what happened and what our interviewees said about our project. But we had to pick the best and we had to cut. We had to limit it. Some of you, I just was looking at some of the questions. Yes, attention span of people is very short. So keeping the video as short as you can, it's a must. So pick the best, the most telling example that you have and show that one. Don't overdo it with too many little things. Keep it simple. And also in terms of language. Be careful about using simple language so that everybody can relate to it, so that it's not full of jargon.
Again, think about your audience and think about who really should hear and understand your message.
Exactly.
Now, let's see if we still have a few more questions from our audience. I see some questions coming in. And also, I'm very happy to see that by the end of the session, we have more than 200 people following us. Which
Thank
is
you very much.
Nice. So let's see. Last chance to send in your questions if you have any. We're going to take a couple of them. I know that we're just going past our 1-hour marker, but if you have any burning questions, now is the time to send them through. Petra, what do we have?
A very quick one. Carrie is asking, what is the animation program you used for the first video? Well, we did use an external provider who did the animation for us.
Yes.
So it was not really done by us directly. We had to find an external company doing the animation.
Depends also on the kind of video that you're going for, because this animation was produced in the beginning of the program. And as Petra said, we worked with an external supplier and an expert on it. But these days you have a lot of online tools that are either free or for a relatively cheap license. So you can also look into those if you want to just build simple stories, and especially if you plan to use them mainly online or perhaps on social media, it might not make so much sense to invest in a full animation, because animations are quite costly.
Oh, yes.
But yes, there are cheaper tools available as well, and many of them are online.
Certainly have a look, certainly check what's available. But always think about, is it really good value for the effect that you can reach with such an animation. We have a question which we addressed a little bit. Neil is asking about an attention span. What about attention span of the audience? In the web age, it's reduced. Are there any golden rules? This is something we skipped a little bit, but we would say that a short video is 1 minute. There are many social media that don't even let you, that don't even let you upload a video that is longer than 1 minute. So I think 1 minute is, I would say, is now more or less the golden standard.
And even for a longer video, it's getting shorter and shorter.
Oh, yes.
all the time.
Yes.
So right now, we would say that even 3 or 4 minutes is already quite long.
It's getting long.
So I would definitely keep any video that you're working on or planning to work on under 5 minutes for sure.
Yeah.
And if you can, narrow it down to, let's say, 2 or 3 minutes. That would be perfect. Even we struggle with this because we know that it's not easy. There's so much to communicate, and it's sometimes hard to press it down into just a couple of minutes, but it's a goal worth striving for.
But maybe, you know, when you are at this editing stage and you have maybe your video in about 4 to 5 minutes, test it with someone. If they tell you, yes, I'm not getting bored, you know, after the first 2 minutes, maybe you have the right length because you make the story that engaging that people get lost in that story. And then 5 minutes might not be too long, but really try to keep it as short as possible, but still try to contain the key elements of your story so that you make the message heard.
And again, depends a lot on your audience and a lot on your aims for the video. I mean, different platforms have different requirements, so it's very hard to say if there is a golden rule as such. But testing in this regard also helps. And if you have a very long video, maybe you can also think about breaking it into smaller pieces and do maybe a sequence or a series of different videos. I mean, you don't always have to bundle everything together. You can also, if it's comments from your stakeholders or if you're doing a video in an event, maybe break it into different parts.
We are really running out of time. We are so happy you can still stay with us for a few more minutes, but we would like to take a few more questions. We are almost done. There is no more additional information, but to going back to your questions.
And just as a reminder, we are being recorded and this session will be available afterwards. So if you cannot stay with us until the very, very end, you can always check back later.
Yes, we'll be sharing the video with you. But going back to questions, Mia, Rahela is asking, I'm from Croatia. What about language? Should it be English or native? And then maybe put English subtitles. What would be your advice?
Again, depends on your audience. I mean, of course, if you're mainly communicating or if you want to pass your message to your local audiences, then I would say that the local language really makes sense. Then again, if you want to share it with your partners, especially when talking about Interreg Europe and the fact that we tend to have partners from all different corners of Europe, at least subtitles would definitely be necessary. But also, if you have a look at our web documentary, even we did sort of a mix between the two. We have some videos that are fully in English, and we have some videos where some of the people speak the local language. And then we just ended up adding subtitles at the end of the editing. So really, depending on the purpose of the video. Also, we were talking about authenticity and keeping it kind of real. And sometimes it really makes more sense to let people speak in their own language because it's so much more natural and less rehearsed, and they're less stressed. I mean, just being filmed already is a very stressful situation. So if you can ease that by letting them speak in the language that they're most comfortable with, you should definitely do that.
So you can always propose to those you are interviewing, if you feel comfortable in English, please speak in English. If you are not comfortable in English and you will come across more yourself and you can really pass your enthusiasm and pass all this passion you have for that subject you are talking about, let them speak in their language and then replace it with English subtitles. Because here, when we think about any communicating, and especially video communicating about your project, remember you are an interregional project. You have many partners, and the interregionality, meaning that you are finding inspiration and you really work together across many different regions and many different countries. This is a unique element that should be visible in
so
your
sometimes
videos.
Using several languages even helps you to stress that point, that this is really not just one entity talking, but there's really all types of different partners. And also with natural and normal, let's say, languages and normal ways of speaking, you can also highlight the different types of people. I mean, a politician doesn't speak in the same way as an employee in a local company, nor does a project manager who knows the project really, really well compared to someone who might have never heard the acronym but know very well the activities that they're involved in.
Some of the stakeholders are very engaged but maybe don't know the details of the project. So
yes, showcasing that variety is definitely...
So go for English subtitles if it helps to tell your story even more effectively and use your languages.
All right, a last chance to send in your questions. We'll have a quick look what else we still have here. So feel free to send in any that you have. Our colleagues behind the scenes are answering them. They're typing away as we speak. And we
now
still have...
Neil is asking, do you think writing a target audience profile helps? I think it really helps.
It really can help. A lot of people work with personas and they work for many different types of things. It could work for your stories as well, especially if you agree on certain types of profiles among your project partners, or if you really make it clear from the beginning, then yes, having a certain type of person in mind. Who am I talking to? How do I get my message across? How do I formulate my story so that it really, delivers on my expectations? Yes, it really can be very, very helpful.
Yeah, especially when we were talking that you should look in your story for the things that interest your audience. So knowing your audience, knowing what motivates them, knowing what interests them, I think this kind of a profile can be very, very helpful when you are putting the story together. And yes, this will be something very interesting for this target segment that I would like to talk to. Another element might be interested for another. Careful so that you're kind of splitting it between different target groups is not kind of dividing the story too much. You do want to keep this consistent storyline, but there are elements that speak to different people, and thinking about, oh, this is a motivating element for one, this is an interesting element for other, but still I can put it in my story and make my story speak to as many people.
Building on some type of examples or personas can be very helpful, especially if you do it early on in the project, because you can then use it for a lot of other things as well, not just for the story, but for all of your communication. And also it helps you to think about how you craft your messages for your website, or how you do your dissemination events and so on. So it can definitely be a very useful tool.
Exactly. You are all communicators. We are speaking to target audiences, so knowing our target audiences is basically the key. It's the important element. Another question, I think we already touched upon it just before this final slide that we have, and it's a question about money, about the funding. Paulina is asking whether there are any additional resources that the projects can get for this project video, really for this final project video.
For the final project video focused explicitly on your best result, as we briefly mentioned, there is no additional support as such. We can grant up to 5,000 euros, but it has to come from the underspending of your project. So in case you're at a phase where you already have results and something to promote, and in case you have underspending that would allow you to reallocate 5,000 on this course, then you're more than welcome to do so. And for the rest, yes, no additional ones. I know that a lot of projects are going to be working on videos anyway, so don't feel that this results video is the only video that you're ever going to work on. Look at the tips and look at the ideas that we've shared today and see if that helps you to work on the other videos that you have already planned to do during your project.
Maybe we take final question, and for the rest, because it's already 15 minutes past, we are so happy, that you're still staying with us. We take one last question, and then I think we take care of all the others in writing. But Giorgio is asking, would it be better to send the video to you for your verification, or to receive your any additional inputs before publishing it?
Depends on the video. Depends on the video a little bit, but in principle, well, we don't approve the videos as such. I mean, these are your videos. You are the one who knows your project and you know how to share that message. That being said, we're more than happy to comment on it if you do have a draft, and if there's anything specific that you want to check. But mostly in terms of whether it meets the requirements, have you included the necessary elements in it, and so on. But the story and the video itself is really it's your project. Let's say.
So I think that's what Mia said. Make sure you respect the publicity requirements. Inform us, especially regarding this one story that the program supports. Inform your policy officer, finance officer that you plan to do this. And then along the editing line, we trust you that based on this webinar, you will figure out how to tell your story. Look at other examples, really get your inspiration, keep it short, keep it simple, keep it consistent, keep the key messages. It is about result. It is about policy change. There are some beneficial effects for people. It is thanks to the inspiration from other partners. The interregionality is part of this, and so, you should be fine.
So even though the video itself, the result results video would be about that one key example. We still wanted to highlight the fact that this is because of interregional cooperation, and it is a result of the project. So don't turn it into self-promotion of any specific partner alone or one specific initiative. Really build your storyline so that it shows where the inspiration came from, how that was transferred or implemented in the region, and how that result of cooperation is now making lives of people better in one way or another.
Yeah. So with specific questions, you can always contact your respective communication officer. But we don't expect to be your editors. Please do not make us your editors. Think about your story and inform us you are doing it. Respect the publicity requirements, and I think then it's your story. Yeah. Check with your partners so that they can also maybe see that this is a very useful tool for them as well. If they are, for example, the place you take inspiration from, so that really it's not only about one partner. Yeah. And then I think your story will be just fine, and we'll be very happy to have a look at the final version and then decide whether it will become part of the web documentary.
So keep it short, keep it simple, and make it about your project. Have a look at our examples, check for other examples, but really look for your own voice. Tell your story in your own words. Don't feel like there is a model or, you know, an outline that you absolutely have to follow. Yeah. Do it in a way that works for you. I think we're going to wrap up now.
Yes, let's wrap up.
We have two little concluding messages. We hope that you found the session useful, and we hope that you had found some ideas for developing your project stories. We're going to continue working on stories. And we're very happy to announce that next year there will be more stories available. We're going to focus on the results of interregional cooperation in the next Europe Let's Cooperate event, which is taking place on the 9th of June in the beautiful city of Dubrovnik. You're all most welcome to join us there. We're going to share more info soon, but save the date for now. So we're going to focus on results, stories, achievements, and we're going to talk about the future.
Yes.
So a very exciting day ahead. In the meantime, that's still about half a year away. Our web documentary is available. The stories that are featured, there's 6 of them at the moment, 5 of them?
Five videos.
There's 5 stories, but we're looking forward to adding the 6 and additional ones.
Yes.
So get going on your stories. Have a look at the ones that we already have out there. And
with this, Mia, thank you so much for being here with me. Thanks so much for our colleagues who are typing hard and trying to answer your questions. Yes. Thanks so much for your active cooperation and the active contribution to this webinar. We'll answer any remaining questions. Please tell us whether you appreciated this webinar in the little survey that pops up as soon as we finish. And good luck with your storytelling.
Yes, we look forward to seeing them.
Exactly.
So, thank you.
Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.